Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the next part of the Q&A with Saif and me. And today we will discuss the next batch of questions that we have received either through Discord, through YouTube comments, or through some other channel that we have observed. And I think we will just start. As always, if you have additional questions or questions concerning the answers we give, just put them down in the comments below and we will address them in a later video. Unless they have been asked many times before, then we would kindly advise you to just look through the others and you will likely find them. Also in the book that I've written, there is a list of all the questions and answers at the end, so you can easily search, hopefully. Okay, but without further ado, the first question is as follows. The person wants to know, I am a little confused how one practices or internalizes the three characteristics and dependent origination. For example, does one actively try to recognize them during meditation or in daily life? You want to start, or should I?
Sure, I'll start.
Okay.
I would say that, yeah, it's better to try and recognize them during meditation, or I guess more accurately, you would say like seclusion. Seclusion of body, like physically secluded from distractions, from sensual pleasures, from company, and also like internally secluded mentally. And then you're doing the work of not giving in to those intentions of greed, aversion, and distraction. So yeah, when you're not distracted, your mind is fairly calm. That's the best time, because dependent origination obviously means looking at the condition of your experience. And that's the opposite direction of all your normal experience. Normal experience is always just looking at the foreground, about particular things going on in your senses, whereas dependent origination is about going more towards the background, or your experience is dependent on universally the body or the breath. And if you try to do that in daily life, it's going to be hard, because when you're doing things, you're always fundamentally going to be absorbed in the things you're doing, at least to a certain extent. Like if you're washing the dishes, for example, like there's a part of your attention that's going to be related to the particular things going on in your hands and so on, and your visual sense and your feeling. And it's very hard to then, at the same time, put your attention towards the background. So yeah, in daily life, it's better to just simply be aware of your intentions of greed, aversion, distraction, don't act out of them. And then for more heavy duty insight stuff, you want to be more secluded. Yeah.
Maybe one more thing. Once you have attained a certain degree of insight, as in you have seen the nature of certain phenomena as, for example, anicca, dukkha, anatta, then you can also recognize them in daily life. But the first time, when you practice towards realizing that, then you have to be secluded. There's not really any other way. But the insights themselves, they stick. So after you've seen them once, it is much easier, and you will see them everywhere, pretty much. Also during daily activities, during talking, during walking, washing the dishes, everything can become Dhamma, but it requires a certain degree of training. And the training has to be done beforehand. What do you know? And also that kind of vision of the Dhamma, however you want to call it, the seeing of dependent origination rightly, that is kind of binary. So either you see it or you don't see it, and you will know when you see it. But again, I don't think I know anyone who started seeing the Dhamma in busy daily life. I think it always happened in seclusion for all those people I know. So, anything you want to add?
Yeah, you're completely right about being like binary. That's why like the Buddha says that like just a finger snap worth of seeing impermanence is like worth all the merit in the world. Like not because it's like the Dhamma is so great and it's just like a rhetorical thing, but literally like if you see it for a finger snap, you can never unsee it. Like it's binary. Your experience is the right way. So yeah, once that's done, then you can see it in daily life all the time. But that needs to be done first in seclusion. Yeah.
Before that, you cannot really see it at all. I mean, you can get maybe a glimpse of it, you can get an idea of it, an inkling, an understanding, intellectual, but the full inversion of your experience that happens through the seeing of dependent origination, that is binary. It just clicks and then it's there. But it is obviously, there's a lot of build up to the process. It's not like the sudden enlightenment schools sometimes suggest that it can happen to anyone at any time. It can happen if you have trained yourself. So it can happen. So you increase the chances for it to happen, so to speak, through the gradual training. Without it, it's impossible to ever see it. Yeah. And in terms of seeing, when we say seeing or recognizing dependent origination, could you maybe say a few words about the right seeing of the background? Because when we say seeing, I would imagine that most people think of making it another object of your attention. But that is kind of not how it works.
Yeah. I mean, like a good analogy is like your own, like the relationship between your eye and your sight. Like through your sight, you can never see your own eye. That's impossible because it's the condition of your sight. Like even if you're looking into a mirror to look at your own eye, that's still like a sight that's in front of you. It's not the literal eye. So that can never be an object of your experience. It can only be sort of discernment and knowledge. And that's the exact same for any background phenomena in your experience that you're trying to discern. So if you're trying to discern like the nature of the body as a condition for your experience, to see that, it's not necessarily about like perceiving either sensations of the body or even perceptions of the body, how it feels and so on. Like that can be a decent starting point, but you have to realize that like it's only because the body is there, that's why you can have perceptions of it, and that's what needs to be discerned. So it can't be on the level of the object of your experience. And that's what makes it's so subtle and so hard to see, and why a Buddha had to arise to see it. And it's also why like sense restraint and so on needs to be developed in advance, because if it hasn't been developed, then it doesn't matter how much the mind tries to see that background, it's going to confuse it with any sort of foreground experience. There needs to be that level of non-concern with any foreground sense experience, the abandonment of joys and griefs towards the world, and then the mind is able to like turn away from it and see the condition. Or it's never going to be at the level of the object. It's always going to be subtle. It's going to be the level of knowledge, discernment. The Dhamma eye awakens basically, or a different type of sight that you're usually used to.
No, it's a knowing. It's a type. We call it the type of inferential knowledge, so to speak. Just knowing the condition of something that you see while you see that something. So it's always in the background. Yeah, it's very subtle, it's very hard to see, but when you see it, you cannot imagine how you could have ever not seen it. So it's kind of tricky. But anyway, I think that should be enough on that question. Let's move to the next one. And the next one is from another anonymous person, and that person wants to know, is non-craving meditation the same as what would be called Shikantaza in Zen? I probably have butchered the pronunciation, but as I understand it, it is a method of no method, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like normally translated as like just sitting.
Just sitting meditation,
yeah. And it's like, I guess since it's called just sitting, it's more similar to what we talk about than dissimilar. It doesn't necessarily mean it's exactly the same. Like when we talk about doing meditation, like, you don't need to have an object which you're focusing on. Or that could even be a bad thing in some cases. Literally all you need to do is like just choose a posture, sitting down, and don't give in to intentions of greed, aversion, distraction. Don't engage with sensual pleasures. Any unpleasant feeling comes, like don't give in to aversion towards it, and just don't give in to those intentions that urge to distract yourself. And then calm will emerge from that. Like literally, like any feeling could come your way then, and you will be unmoved by it. And that's the extent of the concentration the Buddha is talking about. And you don't need an object. But that doesn't necessarily mean like, you should like Shikantaza is the true practice. I need to become a Zen Buddhist. I will now read Dogen and join a Soto Zen temple. the thing is, like, if it is sort of more accurate in some senses, it's because it's already contained within the suttas. So it's better to just like try to like read the suttas. Like when the Buddha talks about the 4 right exertions, like just not giving into unwholesome and increasing the wholesome, like that's already expressing what might be expressed through Shikantaza. Just just sitting and not giving into unwholesome, increasing wholesome. That's just sitting in a nutshell. But yeah, you don't want to like go too far away from the suttas. Like if you start to like become a Soto Zen practitioner and then you start to think about themes that are very different sometimes from the suttas, like you start to think about the themes that your mind revolves around and now like Buddha nature. That term that Dogen uses, like uji, just translates like time, being, and there's all the speculation about the nature of time in relation to practice. There's the Dogen's doctrine of the unity of practice enlightenment. Like these are just themes that are very different than the suttas, and because they're different, they could lead you into different places. So it's better to just stay with the suttas. And yeah, 4 right exertions already exemplifies this whole thing. 4 foundations of mindfulness already exemplify this whole thing. Sense restraint already exemplifies it. So yeah, those are more accurate terms usually.
And I think they also have less room for error, because the Buddha was very clear that any technique or method of meditation that he prescribed always revolves around only a certain kind of intention, namely intentions of greed, aversion, and delusion that should be left undone. And when you practice something like doing nothing in meditation, it's easy to also, well, cancel out or stop doing those intentions that are kind of good or beneficial for you. So you can also go too far in one direction. And kind of the big chunk of the understanding before stream entry revolves around understanding that difference. So when you just sit doing nothing at all, then that's also very possible that you go too far in one direction, and that should very much be avoided. So there is a difference between the just sitting meditation and then the right kind of meditation that just abandons greed, aversion, and distraction or delusion, or however you want to call it. At least as I understand it. But I only have limited knowledge about Shikantaza.
I think that's accurate. Yeah, and like the Buddha like even talked about like right effort in terms of those very extreme terms, like willingly like let my body like fade away, let my sinews let the blood drip out of my body, but I will not relax my energy until I've attained what can be attained. So it's not about having no goals, it's just about having the correct goal and then working towards it, which is abandonment of greed, aversion, delusion. Yeah.
Oh, that's very important. And I think that is where many people go overboard with such kinds of practices. That is, by the way, also, at least how I understand it, that many practices can work for a time because they move you in the right direction a bit more than you have been before, but then it sends you overboard in another direction. So without the understanding of wholesome and unwholesome, no matter how you put it, it's kind of impossible to practice absolutely rightly. And yeah, those methods usually will not be able to give you that, but they are certainly for some people a step in the right direction. As in many people who do a lot in meditation, focus a lot, do a lot of intense sensation watching or something like that, they can benefit a lot from that practice initially, but even they should make an effort to distinguish wholesome and unwholesome. Otherwise, there's no breakthrough to the Dhamma.
Yeah. In that sense, like, there's nothing necessarily wrong with if you want to read like Dogen, for example, or some things from other sects and take little parts. Sometimes they're useful at certain times, but ultimately your end goal is to resist the idea that you need anything external from the sutras, because everything's contained in there, and like the flow says, like the discernment of wholesome and unwholesome is fundamentally going to come from there, and that's what's often going to be lacking from other traditions. If you read for example, the Hongji Zhengzhu, who's like the originator of the silent illumination tradition in Zen, you'd be surprised by if you read his works, like how little craving is mentioned, whereas in the sutras that's like the main thing that's mentioned. It's just little things like that where you put your focus and your attention, which are going to lead to the correct discernment.
And a lot of the times, but the suttas are all over the suttas, there are lots of synonyms for craving, or other ways to phrase the word craving, other categorizations for what craving is. But the entire thing kind of revolves around craving. So when you miss that entirely in any tradition, that's kind of a red flag. Yeah. Anyway, anything else on that question, or should we move on?
I think that's enough.
Okay. I think we will discuss part of that question in other upcoming questions. Anyway, the next question is as follows. When one does breath meditation, is the breath the background and anything additional we notice, like body, thoughts, feelings, etc., the foreground? And I guess that depends on the kind of breath meditation that you should, or that you are doing. There is a breath meditation that is focusing intensely on the breath, and then there is a kind of breath meditation that the Buddha explained, which is seeing the breath as a condition of the rest of your experience, and as a type of mindfulness of the body, developing mindfulness of the body. And in that case, the breath would be the background of your experience, and you try to discern it that way. And everything else that you also notice or put your attention on, that would be the foreground. But that does not mean that the body or the thoughts, etc., have to necessarily be the foreground. It depends on how you direct your attention, I would say. So it always depends on the type of meditation that you are doing, and it depends on if you have the right view developed or not, because it's kind of difficult to see the breath or meditate on the breath rightly without the Yoniso Manasikara developed, because you really have to have the ability to see or to be aware, let's maybe phrase it like that, to be aware of the background phenomena in your experience that also condition your experience as it is. So yeah, it depends. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is more accurate to say the breath is the background, at least from the sutras, because Buddha, he gave that like simile for mindfulness of the body, and he said it's like, imagine your five senses are like animals that are going to their own feeding ground, and mindfulness of the body is basically like you put a stake in the ground and you tie them to it, and then they will just basically be prevented from going to their feeding ground. They'll still try to go there, but eventually they'll calm down. And that's exactly how it works in your experience, because whenever you crave, it's always going either towards or being repelled by things in the foreground. It always requires your attention to be somewhere in the foreground. But if you have your attention set up on the breath as the background, it's impossible for your awareness to be like going towards the background and the foreground and the background at the same time. So if you have your attention on the background of the breath, it prevents the mind from pulling towards the foreground or being repelled by it. And that's why it leads to calm. So yeah, that's how you would do it. You would develop discernment of breath as the background, and it becomes impossible to engage with sensuality or aversion if you're doing it correctly.
Yeah. It might be good to notice or to mention that the kind of calm that results from that type of meditation would be what I would call right calm, because there are other types of calm, but the calm that is developed like that is just the absence of this pulling and pushing of your senses. One could phrase it like that, at least. When your senses no longer drag you here and there after all the sensual objects, then what results is a feeling of peace and calm, and that would be the right kind of peace and calm that is advocated and praised in the suttas. And other types of calm that result, for example, from eating chocolate because you were craving chocolate, those are also calm types or types of calm. But it's not the right type of calm, because that type of calm makes craving stronger in the process, while the other type of calm makes craving weaker. Yeah. Anything else, or should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on, I think.
Yeah, the next question is a bit longer. Let me try to read it. What does enduring distractions look like in practice? Let's say I am simply abiding in boredom and I start to have a sexual fantasy. Once I realize and let go of it, what do I go back to? If there is no meditation object and you are doing a seclusion type of meditation, would it just be a process of repeatedly realizing you are distracting yourself and continually letting go? I'm not really sure where contemplation of dependent origination would fit into this, since there are enough distractions? I think it's your turn. It's a long one.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if there's still the tendency to, like, once a certain distraction has been let go of, to have this attitude of like, what do I do next? It means fundamentally you are still like within the domain of restlessness and distraction. So yeah, it is kind of like you have to keep going further and discerning further levels of the mind of distraction and letting go of it. Because yeah, if you stop too soon, there's no fundamental basis for you understanding the cessation of craving. Like if you want to make a breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths, it means you need to know the extent of craving first. Otherwise, how can you abandon it? So yeah, you need to keep going. And then yeah, once the craving is gone, sufficient enough, there will be no more idea of like, what should I do next? Because that can only be there if there's craving. So you need to keep going until there is like genuine calm. And that might be like seem like, oh, that's really far off. Like, how do I do dependent origination contemplation before then? But instead, you should try to see like that concentration practice as itself already developing your insight into dependent origination. Because the Buddha says so many times, like, a concentrated mind naturally discerns the way things really are. Like he says, like literally no volition need to be exerted for a concentrated mind to see things as they really are. Like it's completely natural. And the more you develop that freedom from distraction, freedom from craving, if you've already read the sutras and listened to Dhamma talks and so on, the nature of things will just simply so become manifest. Because yeah, if there's no more craving, there's no more interference with the experience, then all you will see is things appearing and ceasing by themselves, things appearing of their own accord. And it really is as clear as day. Like the Buddha gave the simile of like, imagine a good man with good eyesight would like peer into a really clear sea, and he'd be able to say, oh, there's this item there, there's this item there. And yeah, it's really as clear as day. And in this sense, there's no dependent origination practice that is different from concentration. I mean, there is a little bit, obviously, wisdom is something on top, but fundamentally, like, developing that concentration is already developing discernment. So that should be developed, basically, that concentration.
The entire Noble Eightfold Path. The training in virtue, watching your intentions, not giving in to your intentions, restraining yourself, enduring bad feelings, enduring the pull of your senses. That is all developing already. The vision of the Dhamma to some extent. You are kind of walking the path, the Noble Eightfold Path already, without realizing it and noticing it. The point of confirmation is obviously the rising of the right view, the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths, however you want to phrase it. But in essence, if you do what the Buddha said, also the preliminary steps, you are moving already in a very good direction. And yeah, as I've mentioned before, all the questions of returning to some object, those aren't necessary when you're truly without craving, when you truly let go, however you want to phrase it. Then that is the most peaceful state imaginable. And there would be no question arising if you should do this next or that next, because that again is just another type of craving that you have not noticed yet. And yeah, maybe direct your attention there. And when all craving is exhausted, then you will know. Especially if you have instructions of another, like Saif also said.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So many sutras like that, literally. And the Buddha says, like, a concentrated monk discerns the origination of the five aggregates and the disappearance of the five aggregates. And he says, yeah, the origination is craving. That is the origination of the five aggregates. So yeah, when you're free from craving through your concentration, that's what you see, the disappearance of the five aggregates, which means the disappearance of self in regards to it, the disappearance of clinging in regards to it, the disappearance of being contacted by the five aggregates. That's what you realize through developing concentration. So even if you don't see it yet, you are developing it if you're going the right direction. But like Flau says, it needs to be developed to the extent where the true peace has emerged, because there's no more craving, because you've discerned the extent of craving and surmounted it.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to realize all of that, because usually we are just used to going after thing in the world, and now we have the opposite instructions. But then again, Dhamma is against the grain of the world, so we kind of have to get familiar with that and used to practicing like that. If you truly are without craving, then there is nothing that you need in that moment. No more questions arise, no more seeking, no anything at all. It's just perfect peace. I mean, it cannot be otherwise. So if there's discontentment with however things really are, some aversion, some next, what do I do next? Then there is craving. You can be absolutely certain about that. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
For that question.
And let's move to the next one. And the next one is a bit shorter. And the person wants to know, I am trying to manifest what I want, but it is not working. What am I doing wrong? I've kind of shortened that question. That person was wanting something very particular. I think it was a girlfriend or something like that. But the gist of the question should be the same, no matter what the person wants to, or is trying to manifest. Maybe. Was it your turn?
I think it's your question now.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is what is even meant by manifesting. I think it's a very popular term nowadays. Many YouTubers try to sell people stuff when it comes to manifesting. And I think they talk about it in terms of really strongly wanting something, and then it will come to you. That's more or less the gist of it. So you really try to visualize it, think about it often, try to pretty much develop craving towards it. And in essence, there is a grain of truth to that kind of practice. I mean, we usually get what we desire as humans, because our actions are in line with our desires and inclinations. So our actions follow our inclinations, follow our karma, so to speak, our karma. And in that sense, it is right. But in various other senses, it is not right, because the action has to follow. If you are not getting what you want yet, then it means that there are other stronger cravings that you also entertain, and that block the right actions to actually bring you to the goal that you desire and want. So in that sense, I would be careful in doing that. Yes, you can get what you want by really making it the strongest desire of yours, within reason, but yeah, it will not bring you any closer to the peace that the Buddha, for example, was talking about. This kind of practices are very mundane, and I would accept if your strongest desire is liberation, of course, but then you would likely not ask those types of questions. So yeah, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I feel like that simile the Buddha gave of the hen and its eggs is quite useful for this. Like, it literally says, like, if doesn't matter if the hen believes that the eggs are going to crack, and doesn't matter if he assumes it, doesn't matter if he thinks about it, visualizes, imagines it. If the hen does not do the things, like literally like sits in it and so on, that would help those eggs come to fruition, they won't come to fruition. And the Buddha says, like, even if the hen does not want it, does not assume it, does not imagine it, if he does the right things, those eggs will crack. So you realize the fundamental thing that's making it crack is the things you are doing. And that's really like the whole essence of like manifesting in Dhamma, is that you need to be doing the things. And yeah, there's a whole, like, I know, like, Neville Goddard, for example, is very popular, and there's like a whole like metaphysical realm to it and so on, and very deep teachings. But fundamentally, yeah, like in Buddhism, the conduct is fundamental. No matter how much you assume it in your imagination, the outer is just not going to manifest it. It's not like in Neville Goddard, where the outer is kind of fundamentally just externalization of your imagination. In Buddhism, it's all about your conduct and not about your assumption. And he says that in regards to all things, like beauty, fame, wealth, especially in regards to the end of suffering. Like, if all you had to do was assume it, that's why you would have taught. But you taught this whole gradual training of things you need to do to develop it. And yeah, that needs to be developed for sure, especially for the ultimate goal.
That is true. I think the phrasings that the Buddha used are very, well, unattractive nowadays, because what he essentially says is you have to put in the work. You have to do it. You have to practice, you have to keep training, and that's exactly what people don't want to do, because there is a lot of effort and a lot of exhaustion and other things that you have to put into the practice, and that's very, yeah, it's not in line with people's immediate desire to have it easy and to have it their way and all the other things. Thus, people very much radiate towards those manifesting practices that just require you to think about it, that just require to desire certain things, and not so much that those that require you to put in the work. But in the end, those people who put in the work usually get what they want, and not those who are lazy and to some extent. And it doesn't really matter if it's mundane or super mundane, by the way. Those people who desire liberation only get it if they put in the work. Those people who desire worldly riches get it if they put in the work. But yeah, it's very natural to be like that, but it's not very beneficial. Okay, do we have time for one more question? I think one should be possible, if it's a quick one.
Actually, this is kind of a big question.
Okay, then maybe we call it a day for today. Thank you all for listening and tuning in to this short discussion. I hope you benefited to some extent from the questions and the answers that we gave you. If you have additional ones, please feel free to put them down in the comments below. We will sort through them. We will filter them. We sometimes change the wording a bit so it appeals to a broader audience, but overall, we will likely give you an answer to your question. And if it does not end up in a video, then it will be or it will be answered at least in a comment on YouTube. Okay, but apart from that, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.